Started. Then we go back to our screen. Okay, so what was Greibach normal form? I had given an example before. This was a grammar in Greibach normal form, where every production is of the form a non-terminal goes to a letter followed by a sequence of 0 or more non-terminals. So here S goes to left bracket, which is a letter, followed by a non-terminal called B, or left bracket SB, or left bracket BS, or left bracket SBS. And finally B goes to right bracket and an empty string of non-terminals. So these kind of grammars are called grammars in Greibach normal form. Now what we did, the theorem that we had was that for any context-free grammar G, we can transform it to a grammar G prime in Chomsky normal form and a grammar G double prime in Greibach normal form, such that the language of G prime and G double prime is same as the language of G except for the string epsilon. Okay, and we did the conversion to Chomsky normal form. Here was the conversion to Chomsky normal form, right? This is what we did last time. We also stated that a grammar in Chomsky normal form can be converted to an equivalent grammar, language equivalent grammar in Greibach normal form. And we are not going to do this conversion, but it exists. If there is time later in the course, we may do it, but at least you should know the result. So everything like this can also be converted to a grammar which is in Greibach normal form. Okay, so we have the special form grammars which will generate context-free languages. Right? Okay. With that much background, let us begin on today's topic. Okay. We saw that there are several languages which are context-free. A language is called context-free. It is generated by a context-free grammar. Okay. Now we showed that A raised to n, B raised to n is a context-free language. Right? Why? Because we could give a grammar for it. We also showed that this was not a regular language. How did we do that? Can anybody tell me? So, Pooja, how would we show? I mean, I'm not asking you to give the proof, but what is the method we would use to show that A raised to n, B raised to n is not regular? Hi, Pooja. Okay, we seem to have lost contact. Darsh? Darsh, can you unmute? It's amazing. Okay. What about Naresh? Naresh? Hello, Naresh. I think I should start taking attendance. I'll take attendance halfway through the class. So what about Uday? Uday, can you unmute? Are you able to hear me? First of all, somebody confirm that you are able to hear me and see the slides.
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Sir, this is Anuj. Sorry, sir. Hello.
Sorry, Anuj. Yeah. So Anuj, can you tell me the method by which we would show A raised to n, B raised to n is not context free? Sorry, is not regular. I think you guys need to study the past material carefully. Remember, to show that a language is context free, we give a grammar for it. To show that a language is regular, we give a DFA for it, or a regular expression. To show that a language is not regular, we use pumping lemma, right?
So we can show it by using the deterministic finite automaton given.
No, but you have to show that A raised to n, B raised to n is not regular. How do you show that?
So,
if it was regular, you could have given a DFA for it. You are right. But if it is not regular, then you have to show that no DFA will give this language.
Yes, sir.
So we used a method called pumping lemma. Okay. So did you attend the pumping lemma class? Anyway, you can go and study it up. I had sent a note out to everybody saying, come prepared reading the pumping lemma. Okay. But that is how you show that the language is not regular. So there are languages which are context free but not regular. So in some sense you have got regular languages and there are context free languages, right? CFL. So CFL is a larger class than this. And one of the things which is here is A raised to n, B raised to n. Another language is the palindrome. That is all words which read the same when you read them forward or when you read them backward. Okay. And that was also not regular, but was context free. We gave a grammar for, we showed, we gave a grammar for this. Similarly, we showed balanced parenthesis languages also regular. All right. So for each of these cases, we gave a grammar which will generate these languages and hence they are context free. We also use pumping lemma for regular language to show that they are not regular, right? Now, how do we know? Okay, so somehow we have to show that every regular language is also context free. This proof we will defer for one more class. We will do this little later. But I want to ask questions like this. What about this language? A raised to n, B raised to n, C raised to n. So, Piyush, do you think this is regular? What do I mean by A raised to n, B raised to n, C raised to n? Some number of A's followed by some number of B's followed by some number of C's where the number of A's, B's and C's are equal. Just as A raised to n, B raised to n had equal number of A's and B's, this had equal numbers of A's, B's and C's, and they occur in this order. So I don't know if Piyush is there. Let me ask Arvind. Arvind, do you think this is regular?
I don't think it's regular because I mean A power n, B power n itself is not regular.
Right. So it's not clear whether this is regular. Do you think this is context free?
About that, it could be.
Right. You could give a grammar for this, right? But for this, does there exist a context free grammar which will generate it? So the question is not so clear, right?
The question is clear, but
answer. I mean,
sure.
the answer to the question is not very obvious, right?
Yes, because I mean, for the derivation of A power n, B power n, we basically substituted A, B in the middle over and over.
Right.
Or in this sides, not in the middle, in the sides. But we can't do the same construction here.
Right, because then, while you are substituting A's and B's in the middle, you have to remember the equal number of C's. And those C's occur not in contiguously with where you are substituting, right? The innermost place. So in some sense, this seems a little bit difficult. Okay. So what we are going to do is we are going to see the method to prove such things are not context free. So this language is not CFL. It turns out that it is not CFL, I'm telling you. But the question is how to prove this. If it was CFL, by cleverness, we could have given a grammar for it. So just as we had a pumping lemma for regular languages, we have a pumping lemma for context-free languages. And just as pumping lemma for regular languages was used to show that some languages are not regular, this lemma will be used to show that some languages like this are not context-free. So is the motivation clear, Vishal? Hi, Vishal.
Hello.
So is the shape of what we are trying to do clear?
Yeah.
Yeah. We use pumping lemma to show that A raised to B and B raised to n was not regular. That was using something called pumping lemma for regular languages. That was one kind of lemma. We are going to have another lemma which is also called pumping lemma, but this time called pumping lemma for context-free languages. So these are two different pumping lemmas, but they work similarly. So we will see this lemma today, and we will be able to prove that this language is not context-free. That's the plan today. So the agenda should be clear to you. Okay, so let's begin. I think It's a very interesting kind of property of context-free languages that we are dealing with. Let's deal with it. Suppose L is a context-free language. What does it imply? Let's forget about epsilon. Hence there will be a grammar in Chomsky normal form. Well, let us say we call that grammar as G, which will generate L. Agreed? Because it's a context-free language, there will be a grammar in Chomsky normal form generating it. Forget the epsilon string. Let's say epsilon is not in the language. It's not so important to have epsilon. Okay. So we have this Chomsky normal form grammar which generates it. Well, what we consider is suppose there is a word X which can be derived in this grammar G. Then we can build something called the parse tree for X called TX. And let me explain to you what is the parse tree of a word X. So let me go to this slide. Here is a grammar. This was the grammar for the language A raised to n, B raised to n. And we consider one particular word within this grammar, which is A followed by B. Do you agree that this is the word? This word belongs to the language A raised to n, B raised to n, and this was the Chomsky normal form grammar that we had obtained in the last class for this language A raised to n, B raised to n. This is the grammar here. Okay, we had a very simple grammar, and to convert it into Chomsky normal form, we had to introduce this extra C and these extra non-terminals AB. So far so good, right? Now what we have here is a parse tree for this word which is derived from it. So how is this parse tree built? You start with the start symbol S, and S can be rewritten as AC. Agreed? You're with me? So what I do is S I rewrite as AC, and so this was my level 0, level 1, and this was my level 2, right? At level 2 I get this sentential form AC. It is basically saying S derives AC. Now from this AC I can do multiple things. This A I can write as small a. That is allowed, right? So this A I can write as small a, and this C I can use this rule and write this C as SB. So I do a kind of parallel rewriting. See, remember in derivation we picked up one non-terminal. Let's say we picked up this C, and we would rewrite this in one step as A followed by ASB, right? And then we would rewrite this A to small a. So we will get ASB, right? So we would take several steps to arrive at this ASB. But here what we are doing is a parallel rewriting. We will derive something from this non-terminal A also, and something from this non-terminal A also. So we rewrite all the non-terminals in parallel or simultaneously. Okay, that is what we do in building the parse tree. So from this sentential form AC, we will get the sentential form ASB at level 3. Okay. Idea is clear. We would have got this in the derivation by a few more steps. Here all those steps which derive A to this and C derive to this, 2 steps are being rewritten as a single level change. Okay, and then at the next level what happens? Once you get a terminal, it cannot be changed. There is no way of rewriting a terminal symbol or a alphabet symbol. So A remains as it is, but both this S and B we rewrite. So this S we rewrite as AC. Again, using this rule, S goes to AC, and this B we rewrite as B. We could have, used any other rule, but basically both these non-terminals S and B are being rewritten to get the next level. And we go on like this till at the end we get the word that is of interest. And this is called the parse tree of this word. So starting from S, you can derive this. And this is a little more economical than, actually doing one step at a time, only substituting one non-terminal. We substitute all the non-terminals in a sentential form in a single move. Okay. So is the idea of parse tree clear? Ishan?
So just to confirm, like when we replace a terminal by a non-terminal, a non-terminal by
terminal.
Basically, when we replace a capital A by a small a, even that's counted as a step, right?
Yeah, that's a step, no, because it requires application of this rule.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So every non-terminal is, is substituted by the right-hand side of one of the rules. That is the way we do it. And a terminal remains as it is. So in some sense, what we are saying is that at every level, we get a sentential form which is derivable from S. We don't get anything which is not derivable, right?
Yes, sir.
And in fact, corresponding to this parse tree, you could have a derivation. You could do only one substitution of one non-terminal at a time. So here what I have done is, in this sentential form, I always pick the leftmost non-terminal. See, I can substitute this A by what it derives and then go and substitute this C by SB, and then I can pick up this S and substitute, or I can pick up this B. In my derivation, I have a choice of which non-terminal to substitute. But that choice doesn't matter. You are doing some substitutions before and some after, but you can derive the same thing irrespective of the order in which you open up non-terminals. Okay, this is the key property of context-free languages. The order in which you open up non-terminals doesn't matter. You can do it in any order, right? So I can choose a strategy where I always open up the leftmost non-terminal. So I can say S goes to AC, and then I have to, I'm in leftmost derivation, I'm forced to choose the leftmost non-terminal. So this A will only go to small a, and then I got small a C. Then this C is the leftmost non-terminal, so I substitute it by C goes to SB, and so I get ASB, which is what I had here, right? So in these two steps I got this. Now I have to pick up the leftmost non-terminal S and I open it as ACB, right? And then I have to open up this A, and I keep on doing this till I get this string. So I can derive this string, you can see more or less, by substituting the leftmost non-terminal. Or I could have got the same string by substituting the rightmost non-terminal. So S goes to AC, but then I open up this C. So C goes to SB, right? So that is what I do. I substitute this C by this SB, and I go on like this. Then I have to open up this B, which goes to small b. Then I have got to open up this S, which will go to AC. So that is how I get it, and I can get the same string. So there can be different derivations corresponding to the string which is accepted by this parse tree. And this parse tree somehow, is a little more abstract. Okay, it's a more concise way of saying how the string is derived without bothering too much about the order. Okay, so we will be dealing with parse tree, and it's very important. This parse tree gives you the structure of the string. It is giving you how this string is obtained in this grammar. So in all compilers, given a program, you will first build its parse tree, and you will use that parse tree to generate code for the program. Or in NLP program, given an English sentence, you will build the parse tree of that NLP sentence, English sentence, and then you will convert the parse tree of English to the parse tree of German, and then you will output the yield of the tree. The last level of the tree, which consists only of terminals, is called the yield. So, ideas of building parse tree are very common, and there are many algorithms which, given the word, will try to build its parse tree. Okay. So derivations and parse trees are two alternative ways of looking at what strings are derived from the start symbol, right? And we saw this parse tree. So idea of parse tree is clear, that you start with the start symbol, substitute it by the start symbol by some right hand side of one of its rules. Now we get a sentential form. In any sentential form that you get at any level, all the non-terminals are simultaneously rewritten instead of writing them in some order. It's the same thing, it's a little more economical. Agreed? So no confusion here. Now I want to talk about some property of such a parse tree. So suppose I have a parse tree of depth n+1. Okay, so it has got n+1 levels. So this is n+1th level. How long can this word be? Parse tree of depth n+1. Okay, or level n+1. It has n+1 levels. Okay, a grammar is in Chomsky normal form. How long can this word be? Can somebody tell me? At most, it can be shorter than that. But what is the worst that can happen? What is the longest word you can derive using a parse tree of depth n plus 1? This is the question. And it can't be very long because, at each time we can substitute a non-terminal by two non-terminals. Nothing more can happen. So let's try to imagine the worst case scenario. Not this tree, but this S can go to some AB, not in this grammar, in some grammar. This can be written by two non-terminals. This can further be written by some A1, A2, B1, B2, right? So at each level, the size, each non-terminal gives you, is replaced by two non-terminals, and the size of the sentential form doubles. This is the worst that can happen in terms of growing size of the non-term of the sentential form. Is this clear to you? From level n to n plus 1, level I to I plus 1, the size of the sentential form can at most be double. No more than that, because we are writing a non-terminal by either a terminal which keeps the size same, or we are writing it by two non-terminals. So in the worst case, at every level we will keep writing for the first n levels. You will be doubling the size of the string. So at the level n, what will be the size of the string? Purely non-terminal string. Can somebody tell me? At level 1, it is 2 raised to 0. At level 2, it is at most 2 raised to 1. At next level, it will be double of this. So it will be 2 raised to 2, at level. Okay, let's start. So at nth level, what will it be? 2 raised to
n minus 1.
Right? Now, what you have here is a sequence of non-terminals, A, B, C, whatever, So far, we have only substituted a non-terminal by two non-terminals. Now, in a single giant step, you will convert all of these non-terminals into letters. So, you will again get string of, length 2 raised to, somewhere I have made a mistake in the arithmetic. Okay, this is 2 raised to n. At the nth, so I am calling this as level 1, is it? Okay. Okay. We can talk about depth of a level. Okay, this is level 1, right? This is level n. In level n, I will get a string of n minus 1. And at the next level, I will get a string of same size, 2 raised to n minus 1. So my claim is that in Chomsky normal form, if you have got a derivation tree with n plus 1 levels, in computer science, sometimes this is called tree of depth n. Okay, so you got a tree with n plus 1 levels, you will get a string which is no longer than 2 raised to n minus 1. Agreed? Ishan, is this clear to you?
Yes, sir.
Piyush, is this clear? Hi, Piyush.
Yes, sir, it's clear.
This is clear, right? So what we are saying is that if you want to derive long strings, you will need to have long, parse trees which are deep, which have got many levels. That is what we are trying to say. Correct? Because with limited number of levels, you can only derive strings of length 2 raised with n levels. You can derive, or rather with n plus 1 levels, you can only derive strings of length 2 raised to n minus 1. Right? Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, this is the property of Chomsky normal form grammars, right? So I ask a reverse question. Suppose I have got a string of length 2 raised to n. Okay. Okay.
Yes.
I've got a string of length 2 raised to n, not 2 raised to n minus 1. What is the minimum number of levels that I will have?
N plus 2.
N plus 2. Excellent. So my claim is that any string of length 2 raised to n will have a parse tree with at least n plus 2 levels. This is the important point. So let me write that fact down in blue. Length of x is equal to 2 raised to n. Then the tree for x, the parse tree for x will have n plus 2 levels. Okay. This is one fact. Okay. So it's very important that you remember this fact. Okay. Now I'm going to have to erase this. So let me clear this level view. Delete layer. So I'm going to delete this and I'm going to write this fact here. If S derives x and length of x is equal to 2 raised to n, then Tx has n plus 2 levels. This is one fact that should be clear to you. And this is for any Chomsky nomogram and any string x which is derivable from it. Agreed? Since this has n plus 2 level, consider the longest path going from the start symbol, the root of the tree, to one of the leaves. So, maybe we can consider a path which goes like this, right? So I can maybe show you that path which goes. I hope this is the path I've used later, but it could be a path like this, right? Since this is the longest path, it will only have non-terminals on the path except at the last level, because otherwise, it would have substituted it by a terminal. And once, it gets substituted by a terminal, we don't call it a long path. The path kind of, ends here. So I'm talking about the longest path where you have sequence of non-terminals and at the end you have a terminal. So what will be the length of this path? It will have n plus 2 nodes, right? Because we just show that, there are n plus 2 levels. So this longest path must span every level, right? So there will be one path within this tree which will have n plus 2 nodes, right? Because the word was of length 2 raised to n. Agreed? Now suppose, so path, let me call that path as pi, has n plus 2 nodes, right? Where, all the nodes before the last thing. So the path that we have got is S followed by C, followed by S, followed by C, followed by S, followed by C, S followed by B, followed by B. There's some path like this is there. So it has n plus 2 nodes, so we consider the long path. Pi has n plus 2 nodes, and the last element in the path is a terminal. Everything else is a non-terminal. Is that clear to you? This will happen. You cannot avoid it. Okay, because you have this string of length 2 raised to n. Its derivation tree only had a height, at least n plus 2. So there will be a long path where there are only non-terminals on the path except at the end. And that path has n plus 2 nodes, 1, 2, 3, 4 if you count, right? Now suppose your grammar has only n non-terminals. Sorry, small n non-terminals. That is, in the grammar, the size of the non-terminal set is, say, small n. Here you have a path where, the number of non-terminals on the path is n plus 1. And in the grammar, there are only n non-terminals available. So some non-terminal will have to repeat on the path. Just as in the original pumping lemma on long words, certain states had to repeat. Here in the parse tree, on the long path, some non-terminal will have to repeat. Is this clear? So in this example, you can see on this path, S repeats several times. It repeats here, 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 here. Similarly, if I draw in blue, then C repeats several times, right? But this is what happened in this tree for this example. But in an arbitrary Chomsky normal form, in an arbitrary string of length 2 raised to n, if the grammar has only n non-terminals, small n non-terminals, then some non-terminal will repeat on the longest path in the parse tree. This is a fact, right? So some non-terminal will repeat, and you can see that repetition pattern here, right? So any questions so far? I think people are very silent. Either they are completely lost or everything is very clear. So I am not able to make out what is the case. So let me ask a few people. Who is there? Let's start from the top. Darsh. Hi, Darsh. Okay, we go to Ishan. Ishan?
Yes, sir, it's clear.
So is the idea clear?
Yes, sir.
What about Naresh? Naresh, the statement we are making is that in a long word of size 2 raised to n, in its parse tree, any parse tree that you build for it, within a Chomsky normal form grammar, there will be a path of length n plus 2, where the last one is a letter, the rest are non-terminals. So on the path there are n plus 1 non-terminals, maybe repeating. But since we have only n non-terminals available in the grammar, one of them will have to repeat. So somewhere some non-terminal will repeat on this path. That is all we are saying. We cannot say where, that depends on the grammar and the derivation, but somewhere it will repeat, right? So here I'm going to, now what you do is you pick out the lowest repeating pair of non-terminals. So on this path that we had considered, let me draw that path again. I was going here and here and here, here and here and here and here. On this path, I start traversing from bottom and I see B. B is not repeating, so I cannot take it. Next one is S. S is repeating. So what I do is I pick up the lowest, non-terminal, which is repeating, and I take that and its next lowest occurrence. So I identify this pair of S's which occur at the lowest level. So identify. In this example, it happened to be S, it could have been A, it could have been C, it could have been any other non-terminal. But you identify the non-terminal which is repeating on the path and take that non-terminal which occurs the lowest on this path, right? So in this example, it happened to be S. C also repeats, but C does not occur at the lowest level. There is S which is at level lower than that which is repeating. So we pick up S. And we pick up that S as well as the S which is higher than it. Identify lowest repeating pair. So is the construction clear? If you have a string of length 2 raised to n, we will have a long path. On long path, some non-terminals will repeat, one or more. You pick up the lowest repeating non-terminal pair like this. So far so good? Now remember what is happening in this derivation. We had this S, and from that we derived this sentential form. There this S was occurring, right? From this S, forget what happened before. From this S, we have this subtree under the S, right? Let me draw it in green. Under this S, we have this subtree. Under any let me draw it. Under this S, we have this subtree, right? And that particular non-terminal, that particular node in the parse tree derived this string AAABBB. So this S derived AABBB. Similarly, this C derived which string? So let me remove that and tell me what string is derived by this subtree which starts with this letter C. So Darsh, can you tell me what is the string derived by this C in this parse tree? It is also called the yield of that particular node C. You know, its yield is AA BBB. Okay, so every non-terminal has a subtree under it, and its yield gives you what is the substring which is derived by that non-terminal. Now, you know, property of context-free grammar is that, you know, wherever C is there, you could substitute this subtree, because you know you can rewrite this C independently of where it occurs, right? So while we had this subtree for C, we could have, instead of, and this, so let me give that example using S now. So we have these two S's, and the lower S derives the substring AB, right? So the lower S derives this substring AB. So I will call this substring as W. You know, the overall string which was derived was some Z. Z was this overall string A B B B B. That is what we have the parse tree for. This subtree derived by the lowest repeating non-terminal is what I will call as W. There is this upper S. You know, it has a subtree under it which embeds this subtree of S inside it. The string derived by this, you know, I'm going to it's going to derive this string, right? Which goes from, so I can write it in three parts. It has this part followed by this part, followed by this S, no, followed by this part. So this I'm going to call it V, and I'm going to call this as X, right? So what happens is that given these two innermost pairs, the innermost S, the lowermost S derives this string which I'm going to call W. In our case, S was rewritten as AB, and that A was rewritten as A and rewritten. Wherever S occurs, we could have, you know, this S is deriving a different string, but in my tree, I could have deleted this subtree of this S and substituted it by this, right? Because the derivations are context free. Anytime a tree rooted at S occurs, I can substitute it by any other tree rooted at S, right? These trees are completely substitutable, and I'll still get a valid parse tree which will derive a different word. The word will change, but it will be a valid parse tree in the language, in the grammar. So what I'm saying is, I have this innermost S which is deriving this string called W, and then I have the next lower S which will derive a larger string, right? Because this S is occurring in its subtree, you know, it will derive a larger string. So that larger string will have some part before that inner string W, which I call as V, and the following part which I call as X. Is the way I get VWX in my parse tree clear to you? And the part before the V, from the root I am deriving the whole string Z. So the part before the V I am going to call as U, and the part after the X I am going to call as Y. So this is a way in which I split this string Z, which was of length 2 raised to n, into 5 parts, U, V, W, X, Y. This is a way of splitting the string into 5 parts. And that splitting is based on these repeating non-terminals. So the lowermost occurrence of a repeating non-terminal gives you the string W. The next lower occurrence gives you the string VWX. So the part before W is called V and the part after W is called X. I've just given them this name. Whatever string this upper X derives, from that you find out where this W occurs, and the part before that you call as V and the part after that you call as X. So you know, and the overall word which is derived is Z. So the part before this VWX we call as U, and the part after that VWX we call as Y. So what I'm saying is, given this parse tree and these two innermost occurrences of repeating non-terminals, we can break up the word Z into UVWXY, 5 parts. Is this understandable? Let's take a pause and get the argument clear. So this lemma is also sometimes called UVWXY lemma. You know, basically a long string of length 2 raised to n or longer, you know, this fact will occur. For any string which is either 2 raised to n or longer, you know, we'll have such repeating non-terminals on the longest path, and you know, the innermost occurrence will derive this string W. You know, the next occurrence of the repeating non-terminals will derive the string VWX. So the part before W will be called V, part after, and the overall parse tree is deriving the string which we call as UVWXY. This is what happens. And this diagram should make it clear to you. So I know this is a little bit abstract and you need to concentrate a little bit, but I think it's a very interesting property. And you know, you have to think a little bit abstractly. So what are we saying? Let me see if I have things written. So given a context-free language, we consider a parse tree for a word X using this Chomsky normal form grammar. If the word is longer than length 2 raised to n plus 1. Okay, here I'm using different terminologies. Okay, so if the word is longer than, here I'm counting depth from level 0 to level 1 to level this thing. So what we called as level n plus 1 will become n plus 2. So okay, you know, it will have a tree which will have depth at least n plus. Okay, let's go with our old terminology. Any word which is longer than 2 raised to n, you know, will have at least n plus 2 levels. It will have a long class with at least n plus 1 internal nodes and then a terminal node. So if the number of non-terminals is n, hence some non-terminal repeats on the long path. Okay, consider the lowest pair of this. Okay, this is the situation that we wrote. So this is what we are saying, that any string of length 2 raised to n, you know, where n is the number of non-terminals, will you know, there will be some repeating non-terminals in its parse tree, and that will allow us to break the string into these 5 parts. Let me. Is there any question so far? Do you want me to repeat the argument? Let me start from bottom. Vishal?
Yes, sir.
Clear?
Yeah.
Okay. So we have this string which can be broken into these 5 parts UVWXY, based on which the repeating non-terminal need not be S. It could be some A which could have repeated at the lower level. In this example, it didn't, but some non-terminal, right? Yeah. Now, some more properties of these strings UVWXYZ. Firstly, you know, W, this S was the lowest repeating non-terminal. So all the non-terminals under its tree, you know, are distinct. You know, on no path does a non-terminal repeat, right? Because this was the lowest repeating non-terminal. So the length of W, you know, will be small. Length of W will be less than equal to 2 raised to n. Okay. So length of this W will be less than equal to 2 raised to n. Sorry, what did I want? Let me go a little ahead. Yeah, okay. More than that. So what length of this W will be 2 raised to n. What will be the length of this string? It can also not be very long, because there is only one occurrence of S which repeats. And here in the V part and X part also there are no repetitions, right? So it will be at most 2 raised, length of VWX will be at most 2 raised to n plus 1, right? Double of that. Because there are no repeating non-terminals in this part, there are no repeating non-terminals in this part, this string cannot grow very long. Okay, so basically there is a bound on how long this string can be. It cannot be a very long string. Agreed? And you also know that this S and this S are distinct. This S is embedded inside this S, and we don't have any non-terminal A which goes to epsilon, because the grammar is in Chomsky normal form. So A goes to epsilon. So this part V will either be non-empty or X will be non-empty. It is possible that I can have repeating S like this. This S occurs here and S occurs here, and here I have some A and I derive something here. So it is possible that V is empty, but in that case X will be non-empty, or X is empty and V can be non-empty, or both are non-empty. So I have the following properties from this derivation. First is that the length of VWX is less than equal to 2 raised to n plus 1, and Vx is greater than 0. That is, both V and X cannot be empty, and the whole string VWX which is derived from the second lowest repeating non-terminal is not very large. It is at most 2 raised to n plus 1. Agreed? So not only can we break up this string Z into 5 parts, but this part is not very long. It has a bound 2 raised to n plus 1, and this both V and X cannot be empty. Okay. Now what can happen is, this S derived this subtree, right? This S, okay. So let me go not here. This S derived this, this is the derivation tree from this second lowest S. Somewhere there this S occurred, right? And that S went on to derive this string W. What I can do is, I can actually take this S and substitute it by this subtree. So I don't derive this longer string VWX, but I derive only string W at this point. So I'll get a transform tree. Or what I can do is, where this inner S is there, I substitute the parse tree of that inner S by this larger parse tree. Any parse tree of S can be substituted there, and you will get a valid derivation. It will not give the same string, but it will give you a different string. So I can have a different parse tree deriving a different string which looks like this. I had this original thing. Here I had this S, this second, the lowest occurrence of S. I substitute that lower occurrence of S by this larger subtree. So this subtree I substitute by this subtree, and I get this different parse tree. Okay, so in this example, wherever this subtree was there, I substitute it by this larger subtree of S. So this subtree I substitute by this subtree. That I am allowed to do in context-free grammar. So what I get is this transformed subtree. Now in this transform subtree, what is happening? U remains as it is. This V, from the above S remained as it is. This X also remained as it is. Y remained as this inner X, which was the lowermost occurring S in my original tree, gets substituted by this larger tree. So this inner S is going to derive VWX now. Okay, where it was deriving only W, now it is going to derive this pumped string VWX. So instead of deriving W, I can derive VWX, right? So my new string is going to be U, V, then another V, W, X, Y. This is my Z prime that my new tree is deriving. Original Z was deriving in U, V, W, X, Y. And this W was coming from the innermost repeating non-terminal S. I can substitute that by the tree of the second innermost repeating S, and then I will derive instead of this W, I will derive a string VWX, right? So I can substitute this W by VWX, and I'll get a longer string which is also derived by the grammar. So I pumped this, so this can also be written as U V square W XY, sorry, my mistake, X square Y. So this V and X part can be repeated twice. It can, again, you can do further substitution and you can derive U V cubed W X cubed Y. So basically you get U V to some power I W X to the power I Y can also be derived within the grammar. This is the key property. So given a context, a grammar in Chomsky normal form and a long string, yes, Akash.
No, sir,
Hello?
I just reconnect. No, sir, I just reconnected. My internet had gone out for a second.
Sorry, I'm not able to understand. Do you have a question?
No, sir, I just reconnected, so my
Oh, no issue, no issue. But is it clear to you that given a string Z, which is of length at least 2 raised to n, we can break it into three parts u, v, w, x, y. The w is the string derived by the innermost occurrence of the repeating non-terminal, and the next innermost occurrence of the repeating non-terminal gives you string v, w, x, and the part before that is u and y. Then this part v and x can be repeated equal number of times. Okay, and a string of the form u v raised to I, w x raised to I, y can also be derived within my grammar by a slightly deeper parse tree for any I. This is for all I greater than equal to 0. You can even, take this second last thing and substitute it by this. So you can erase you can even take I equal to 0. So that gives us the pumping lemma, and hence I'm going to state the pumping lemma for context-free languages. It says that if the language A is context-free, okay, then there exists a K greater than 0. This K will actually be something like, if n are the number of non-terminals in the grammar of A, then this will be something like 2 raised to n plus 1 is safe to take, right? And k equal to 2 raised to n plus 1. This is what you will do. But basically, we don't know the grammar, so we don't know what that n is. So we'll say there will exist some k such that for any long string, which is of length greater than equal to k, that is of the length greater than equal to 2 raised to n plus 1, we can split it into 5 parts. So this holds for every long string in the grammar, in the language. Okay, for every long string in the language, of length greater than equal to k, where k is 2 raised to n plus 1, we can break it into 5 parts, u, v, w, x, y, where this breaking up depends on the actual grammar and the string, but we don't care. There will exist one way of breaking up this long z into 5 parts u, v, w, x, y, such that the length of v, w, x, the middle part, is not very long. This part we saw was not very long, right? And also v and x both cannot be empty. One of them can be empty, or both of them are non-empty, but one of them is empty, such that this part vx can be pumped. Instead of w, you can rewrite w by vwx. So basically, you can, for every I, you can derive this string, which will also be in the language. So context-free languages have this property that any long string z can be pumped. Can be pumped meaning it can be broken into u, v, w, x, y, such that for every I, this string is also in the language. For every I. So there is a clever way of splitting for a context-free language. There is a clever way of splitting the long string z into 5 parts, such that the parts v and x can be pumped in equal number of times. This is the pumping lemma for context-free languages. Clear? I know it's a lot to go through. Please read this yourself. But the key idea is this, that for any context-free language, there exists a constant k, such that if the string is longer than equal to k, this k depends on the language. So we don't know, given the language, we'll have to be prepared for that thing. For every long string longer than k, that string, every long string, can be pumped. Meaning what? It can be broken into 5 parts, such that u, v, w, x, y, such that this vx pair can be pumped arbitrary number of times. That is the word u, followed by v to the power I, that is v repeated I times, followed by w, followed by x repeated I times, followed by z. Also belongs to the language for any I that you choose. Arbitrary I, 10, 20, 50, it will still be in the language. This is the property of context-free languages. So suppose I have got a raised to n, b raised to n is my language, right? So I choose my string as AB. This is good enough for me to pump. This is my language, no? A raised to n, b raised to n. So I choose my long string z to be AB. Okay, now I claim that this AB, so I choose my K to be equal to 2 and I have this Z which is AB which is long. Now I claim that this AB can be pumped. So can somebody break this Z for me in this 5 parts? So Ishan, my language A is A raised to n, B raised to n. And I claim that for this context-free language, there exists a constant K which is 2, you know, such that every long string can be, which is in the language, can be pumped. So I take this long string AB which is in the language, right? Now how do I break it into 5 parts?
We can take U and Y to be epsilon.
U to be epsilon, Y to be epsilon. So this is U, Y to be epsilon. Then V
I can take as A.
Right? So this is my
Then
V. Then W will be?
W will be B, no, epsilon, and X will be B.
X will be B. So this was very simple, right? This is how I break the string into 5 parts. And then I can pump this V and X part any number of times. So suppose I pump it I times, I'll get string epsilon followed by A raised to I, followed by epsilon, followed by B raised to I, followed by epsilon, right? Which is just A raised to n, B raised to n, right? And we know also for all such i's, the string is in the language A raised to n, B raised to n. So this is how I could break it. So is the example clear? Okay, I'm going to do another example. Suppose instead of this Z, I take string AABB. Okay. My Z is this. This is also my K is equal to 2. So how can I split this into 5 parts? So I'm going to ask maybe Vishal to help us split this. Now there can be more than one way of pumping this string. Huh?
Hello.
Hello. Yes. So what will I take as my UVWXY?
Yeah, just a sec.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we can take U as A.
A. Okay. So very good. I'm going to write that. So A followed by, and this is U. Then
next we can take
V. Yeah. Next is V, UVWXY. So V I can take as
A again. Then we will take epsilon. Then B and B.
U as epsilon. X as
B.
B. And Y as
B.
B. Right? And again, you know, if you pump this V and X any number of times, you're going to do A followed by IA, followed by IB, followed by a B. Right? And that will also be in the language. If you take I to be equal to 0, you will get string AB, right? So you are right. This is one way of pumping. By the way, there is also a different way of breaking this. You know, I can take U to be epsilon. I can take my V to be AA. I can take W to be epsilon. Right? So this is my V. This is my W. Then this I can take as BB, and I can take this to be epsilon. Yet another way is I can take this inner AB as my W, this as my V, and this as my X, and after that epsilon and epsilon. So there are many different ways in which you could have pumped this string, right? Okay. So you're getting some practice of how long strings can be pumped. But the claim is that any long string, you know, longer than equal to K, will necessarily you will be able to pump it by splitting it appropriately into 5 parts, such that all possible repetitions of the pump pair Vx occur, right? So this is the pumping lemma. And we, you know, to prove that a language is not context free, we use this in the contrapositive form, just as we did in case of regular languages. So what you play a game with daemon, you know. So there is a language A given to you, a subset of some sigma star, right? And Your claim is, you claim A is not CFL. And so it will violate pumping lemma. That is what you are going to show, because every CFL satisfies pumping lemma. You play a game with Demon. Demon says, no, 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 this is CFL. I give you the constant K, you know, because for every CFL, there will exist such a K. So I will give you a constant K which will work, which will show that it is CFL. You have to be prepared for any such K which is given by the Demon. Given this K, based on that K, you choose a long string Z, which is at least of length K, but you can choose even longer, right? So you choose a string Z. Now, of course, you know, depending on the string that you chose, depending on if it was a CFL, there would be some way of splitting this into UVWXY. So Demon says, no, 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 even if this Z is long, it can be pumped. And I split it into these 5 parts UVWXY, you know, such that they can be pumped. So he gets to split your Z in any possible UVWXY. You have to show that no matter which way he breaks the string, there exists some I such that the pump string is not in the language, right? And hence it violates the pumping lemma, and hence the assumption that A was context free does not hold. So shall I repeat this once again? If you would like me to repeat this, I will do it once again. So you play the game with Demon. You start by, you want to show that the language is not CFL. So you want to win against any move that the Demon makes, right? So Demon chooses K, because, you know, pumping lemma says there exists K, and so if he thinks it's CFL, so he will choose the K. So you choose a long string, you know, which is you think is not pumpable. Demon says, no, no, this is context free, that it must be pumpable. So he splits it into 5 parts wrongly. But this is what he does. You have to be prepared for any possible such split. For that split, you choose an I and show that the pump string is not really in the language. Whereas if it was CFL, it should have been in the language. So the assumption that A was CFL that Demon made is wrong, and you have proved that A is not CFL. That is the argument. Okay. And because you are prepared to take any possible K and any possible SP, what you are giving is a strategy. You are not doing this for a fixed K and a fixed UVWXY. You have to be prepared for any such split. That we did even in regular pumping lemma for regular language. So this is similar. So we're going to do some examples. So we had this language A raised to n, B raised to n, C raised to n. Okay. My claim is that it is not a regular context-free language, and I'm going to do it by using pumping lemma. So let me do it instead of just going through this. Let me do it manually. Page style graph. Okay. So I have got this language A raised to n, B raised to n, C raised to n greater than equal to 0. Right. This is my language A. Right. Claim not CFL. This is what we want to prove using pumping lemma. Okay, agree? So what is the first step? So Demon will say that this is a context-free language, and he will Demon will choose a K, right? Some 2 raised to n plus 1, where n is the number of, you know, non-terminals in the. So Demon knows this language, and he claims that there is a K, right? We don't know what that K is, so we'll work with this symbolic K, any K. So what do you do? So your moves will be written in black. You choose Z equal to A raised to K, B raised to K, C raised to K. A long string consisting of KAs followed by KBs followed by KCs. Okay. Is the game so far clear to you? That Demon gave you K, and based on that K, you chose this long string Z. And you claim this is not pumpable. So, Satish, is this clear so far? What we are doing? We're going to have to solve these questions. Huh? Okay, so at that point, what Demon can do? He has to choose chooses u, v, w, x, y, which together gives you z, with the property that v, w, x is of length less than equal to k, and vx is of length greater than 0. That is, both v and x are non-empty, and this vwx is of length at most k. Okay. So he chooses some arbitrary way of splitting this string a raised to k, b raised to k, c raised to k into 5 parts, subject to this constraint. Now I'm going to take this string vwx and of length at most k, and I'm going to concentrate on where it occurs. Daemon can make it occur anywhere within this word z, right? So I'm going to take this word a. I will draw it in blue. So I have this word a, a. Then I've got b, dot b, and then I've got c, dot c, and then here's this word vwx, which occurs somewhere within this word z, right? So z is equal to this. Now vwx is of length at most k. So one thing that can occur is it can either occur within the a part. So this could be vwx. This is my case 1. Right? I have this vwx as a window. I slide it across this word and it can occur anywhere. The daemon can make this vwx occur wherever he likes. So suppose vwx occurs in the a part. This is my case 1, where there is some v which is non-empty or x which is non-empty. I know definitely that. So I pump this v 2 times, right? So what I will do is, when I pump this v 2 times, either v is non-empty or x is non-empty, so the number of a's will increase. So I pump with I equal to 2, getting v square w x square, right? I pump it 2 times. Increase number of a's, the count of a's. So if you pump within this part, you will necessarily increase the number of a's. Is that clear to you? Because this part of the string only contains a's. And so the middle part, vwx, when vx is pumped, up, it will increase the number of a's. So you're going to get a string where number of a's is going to be more than number of b's and number of c's. And that cannot be in the language. So daemon cannot really locate vwx in just the a part. Is this argument clear to you? Case 1. It's very important to understand. We don't want to exactly identify what is v and x. We say that if your vwx occurs only within the a zone, then by pumping you up, you will only increase the number of a's. What is the other case? So suppose vwx overlaps a's and b's. So this is vwx. So it has got some number of a's and some number of b's within v, w, and x. We don't know, whether v consists only of a's or it consists of some ab's, whether w contains a b or whether it contains x. But if you pump up, if you choose I equal to 2 and pump up, you're going to increase number of, a plus b's. That is, the number of times a's occur plus the number of times b occur will increase, whereas the number of times c occurs will not change. So again, you will get some string by pumping where there will be more, combination of a's and b's as compared to c, and the string will not be in the language. So it cannot occur also in the part which overlaps only a and b. Similarly, it cannot occur within just the b part or in the part overlapping b and c. And because this vwx is, of length at most k, it cannot span all a, b and c. Because you've got kb's, ka's, and kc's. So there are cases where this string vwx occurs only within the a raised to k part, or it overlaps with a raised to k, b raised to k somewhere in the middle, or it is occurring only in the b part, or it is overlapping b's and c's. If it is only in a part, by pumping up, only a number of a's is increased. If it is overlapping b's and c's, either only number of a's is increasing or number of b's is increasing, or both a's and b's are increasing. But c are not increasing. So you will not get equal number of a, b's and c's. And this is the argument which shows that any way of splitting this, when this window VWX is of length at most K, pumping will give you a string which is not in the language, and hence, this language is not context free. Is that, the argument is a little bit subtle, but I hope you've been able to understand that. Is this clear? Ishan?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Yeah. See, it's a simple argument. If your pumpable string is only within this part, then by pumping up, you will only increase A's and B's. You will not increase C's, and so you will not get equal numbers. Similarly, if it is only within A parts, only A's will increase. So it's a very simple argument about where this string VWX occurs. And you don't have to really argue about exact split between V, W and X. Okay. This is what we do. Okay, I'm going to do one more example. Suppose our alphabet sigma is AB. And we consider language of all strings of the form WW, where W belongs to AB. So, what are some typical words which will be in this language A? I could have had A, B, A, right? So I can split this word into two parts such that the first part is same as the second part. This is called the WW language. Okay. And my claim is this is also not context free. My claim is that this is also not context free. So shall we play the game with daemon? Okay, so what is the first step? Daemon chooses K, right? What do? You choose a long string which you think is not pumpable. Z is equal to, you choose some string of the form WW. So you choose A raised to K, B raised to K, A raised to K, B raised to K. You can choose any convenient string. So you choose this long string. Agreed? Now the argument is clear. So let me ask Ishan. Ishan, what does daemon do? Daemon chooses UVW XY such that length of VW X is less than equal to K and VX are both not empty. At most one of them is non-empty, right? He will choose some VWX. Now how do we show that you choose I equal to 2 and show that the pump string, in all possible ways in which he chooses VWX, the string is not in the language. So what would be the argument? Ishan, can you help me with the argument?
Yeah. So first case will be that VWX only spans the first A raised to K.
Right. So I will write this string here, A raised to K, B raised to K, A raised to K, B raised to K. And your case one is that VWX is here, right? Your string VWX is in A raised to K part, right?
Yes.
So if you pump up, what is going to happen?
If we pump up, the number of A's in the first part will increase.
And then the string, so the case will not be equal, right?
Yeah.
Right. Case 2?
Case 2 is when VWX spans A raised to K, B raised to K, the first part.
Yeah, it's somewhere in between these parts, right?
Yeah.
So
and again, once we pump it up, number of A plus B's in the first part will be more than number of A plus B in the second part.
Exactly. So again, it cannot be in the language, right?
Yes, sir. And I think
all
all
also
the
not be in this B to A part, right? So the same argument you can repeat for other sections. So it's not very difficult. And you can show that this is. But remember, we chose this convenient string in the language. So always the choice of Z is with you. And so you should choose the Z carefully, okay? Agreed? For example, if you are to show that all strings, I will ask you a question. All strings, language consisting of all X, alphabet is ABC, huh? Such that number of A's is equal to number of B's is equal to number of C's. Okay, is this language clear to you? That all words with equal number of A's, B's and C's. Claim is that this is also not context free. How would we show that? So Arvind?
So we can just use the previous problem that we tackling, A parent, B parent, C parent. I mean, if we split it
And
into
then
that
we already showed that that string could not be pumped, right?
Yes.
Right. So you choose a convenient string. If you take arbitrary occurrences of A's after B's after A's again B's, then maybe there is some way of pumping that string. Huh? So you have to be careful. Choose the string which is easiest to show as non-pumpable. Okay. So your argument is right. Choose the string A to the power K, B to the power K, C to the power K for K chosen by the daemon. And then the argument is already given. Right. So I think we finished that. So that is the pumping lemma. Now in the remaining 5 minutes, I want to show some closure properties of context-free languages. That is, for regular languages, we showed that if A and B are regular, then their union is regular, their intersection is regular, their complement is regular, A catenated with B is regular, A star is regular. We showed all that, right? What are similar properties for context-free languages? That is the question. And the theorem is following. If A and B are context-free languages, then A union B is also context-free. Similarly, reverse of A is also context-free. A catenated with B is context-free. A star is context-free. Okay, so I'll give you, they are very easy proofs, and I'm going to do the proof for this part first. If A and B are context-free languages, then A union B is context-free. You may even be able to help me do the proof, but AB, CFL. So let's say they have got grammars G1 consisting of some N1. Of course, the set of terminals is the same. Then I've got some productions P1, and then I've got the start symbol S1. And I've got grammar G2 for the language B, right? Which will be some N2 sigma, some set of rules P2, and its start symbol is S2. Now remember one thing, in a grammar, if there is a non-terminal called A, you can pick up a fresh non-terminal which is not occurring in it, Z, and everywhere A occurs you can substitute by Z. So you can rename a non-terminal by some fresh non-terminal and the language will not change. Is that clear? Okay. So because we can rename the non-terminals, we can assume that N1 intersection N2 is empty set. So no non-terminals are repeating in these two grammars G1 and G2. If they repeat, rename them. Right? So you've got these two grammars with distinct set of non-terminals, which also means S1 and S2 are different. Right? And we know that language of G1 is equal to A. This need not be in Chomsky normal form. This is anything. And language of G2 is equal to B. Now my claim is I will generate a construct, a grammar G, such that language of G will be A union B. That is all strings are derivable by grammar G1 as well as. So can somebody help me how to do that?
We can have,
Ishan, yes.
maybe we can add a new start state S, and
Right.
from the production from S will go to S1 and S2, and from there we can follow each.
So it will go to what? S1?
S1 or S2.
So either it will go to S1 or it will go to S2.
Yeah, and
right?
after that we follow
And
the same
everything,
production.
otherwise you repeat everything which is there in G1 and G2, right? So your grammar G will formally have set of non-terminals is N1 union N2 union this new S, right? Alphabet is the same. Your production is P1 union P2, that is all the rules in P1, all the rules in P2, union this new rule S goes to S1 or S2, right? And your start symbol will become S. So formally this is the grammar. And it's easy to see that this will derive the language A union B, right? If we had to give a proof, what would we do? We would say that if a string was derivable, belong to language A, that is, it was derivable in G1, we would do a modified derivation. We would start with S, we'll rewrite it with S1 and then mimic the derivation in the grammar G1, right? And get that string. Similarly, for every string in grammar G2, we will be able to give a derivation in the new grammar. If there is a derivation in our new grammar, that derivation must begin with this S goes to either S1 or S goes to S2. And the remaining derivation can be mimicked in the corresponding grammar. So there's this informal proof that we get the same language as A union B. Formally, we have to show that, you know, for any string which is derivable in grammar G1, there is a derivation in our new grammar G. And similarly, for any string which is derivable in G2, there is a derivation in G. And if there is a derivation string derivable in G, it is either derivable in G1 or derivable in G2. And that depends on the very first move that you make. So clear? No, not difficult, right? Okay, next. What about A dot B? That is A catenated with B. So I will add a page there also. So I've got G1 deriving my A equal to language of G1, and G1 is of the form N1 sigma P1 S1, and G2 is N2 sigma P2 S2, right? How will I get a grammar G such that language of G construct G such that language of G is equal to A dot B? So any ideas, Ishan? Hi, Ishan is there?
Yeah, so not sure, but maybe we can add like an intermediate non-terminal, which acts as the start state for G2 once G1 is complete.
Okay, something like that. Arvind, you have some idea?
Not really, sir.
Okay, so suppose we, like in the union case, we add a new non-terminal called S. And suppose we make S goes to S1 dot S2. Now what happens? You can derive from S1 some string, you know, consider the parse tree of this. You know, S goes to S1, S2. You will rewrite this S1 by some X, right? Which is derivable from S1. You can derive from this S2. After finishing the derivation of X from S1, you will start. So everywhere S2 will be trailing behind, right? And then you can replace this S2 by some string Y, which is derivable from S2. So you will get a string of the form XY, which is actually in A dot B, right? See, what am I saying? A derivation within this new grammar, this is my, will start like this. S in one step will go to S1, S2, right? Then what I can do is, suppose there is, see if a word is in A dot B, it can be partitioned into some X dot Y such that X is in A and Y is in B. So there is a derivation of X from S1 in grammar G1. And there is a derivation of Y from S2 in grammar G2. So first what I'm claiming is that there is a derivation from S1 in grammar G1, you know, of string X. And there is a derivation in grammar G2 of string Y. So in my new grammar G, what will I do? I will first write this as S1, S2. Then I will mimic this derivation. But instead of deriving X, what I will derive is X S2. That is everywhere, you know, if this was giving me a sentential form gamma, I will instead get gamma S2. So everywhere that S2 will be trailing behind, and I will not replace that S2 anywhere. So I can mimic this derivation in G1 into a derivation in G. So within G, from S1, S2, I can derive X S2. That is what I claim. And then, sorry, this is in G. And this part of the derivation is mimicking this part. And then I can start working on this S2 part, and in my grammar G, I can derive XY. Right? So this is how, I can do this. And I think we are running out of time. So maybe this part I will take up in the next class, little more formally, but try to think of, how this, and any derivation, in my new grammar G can actually get me, a word in A dot B. I cannot derive anything more than A dot B in my new grammar, So for that, use the property that any string which is derivable in the grammar is also derivable by the leftmost derivation. So you start with S going to S1, S2, then derive the string with leftmost derivation. That leftmost derivation will first get rid of the string corresponding to S1, and then it will give you the string corresponding to S2. So we'll do this in the next class. But basically, simple arguments like this will show that all these things are derivable. We'll take this up in the next class. Let's not hurry unnecessarily. Okay. So that's it for today. And are there any questions? I know we have overshot the time by a few minutes. So please study the pumping lemma and its use, and then we will begin. We were started with closure properties, but we will take it up next time. Okay, so I'll stop recording.